Erev Tov, everyone, and welcome to it's Tuesday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset. Therefore, it must be the Rabbis Discuss with Rabbi Aryel and Rabbi Ancel. And speaking of Rabbi Ancel, let us bring him in just a minute. Let me get his picture up there, and you are on, sir.
Erev Tov, everybody. It's going to be an interesting night tonight.
Okay, so I purposely did not put up what we were going to be talking about tonight because I figured I wanted it to be a surprise. Donald is in the room, and Marshall is in the room, and we got a few watching in the background, and more to come. Okay, so what we're going to discuss tonight is this idea among a majority, I'm not going to say all because it's not true, it's a majority of the Haredi and the Hasidim that believe that because they study Torah all day, that they are exempt from earning a living, or in Israel, even serving in the military. So this is going to be interesting. I got a lot of information here, and I know this is kind of a sore subject with both of us. Maybe Rabbi Ancel even more so than me. So would you like to get your 2 cents in first?
It is a sore subject. It's because 18 years of service you have. I don't know. You never told me how many years were in the service.
3.
3.
I did my tour.
But I've had. Go ahead.
Oh, I said I did my tour.
This is your tour.
Yeah,
I went
3
for
years.
4 wars. So, who needs Hamas, Palestinians who never existed? Who needs outside enemies when we have our own people, and yet they live in Israel, they collect welfare, they collect pensions, and yet they don't recognize the state of Israel, and they walk around with Palestinian flags supporting the Palestinians.
Well, there's a small group who do that, so let's be clear that it's not all the Hasidim, it's not all the Haredim.
No,
it's a small group, but you do have a point. I mean, there is Chabad is in Israel who never did believe in supporting the state of Israel. Satmar is there, who definitely does not believe in supporting Israel.
The only ones who support Israel, as far as Hasidim, is the Breslov.
That's true. Yeah,
they've never had a problem with Israel.
Yeah, there's there's like 136 different Hasidic groups out there, so it's kind of hard to be. I mean, everybody knows Chabad, and pretty much, I would say the majority knows about Satmar, and Breslov is getting bigger and bigger, but there's the Moditzers. They never had an issue with Israel. The Nicholsburg, Kaliv. There's a lot of them out there. So, but let me start out by kind of explaining this. Marilyn has joined us too. Yeah, it's Carta Nature is the ones who go around with the Palestinian flags and protesting and living in Israel and doing all this kind of stuff. Thank you, Marilyn, for doing that. Okay, so let me set this up. Kind of preface it. The soul, as it resides in the goof, that's the upper realms, has the knowledge of all of the Torah. All its laws, all its precepts, all its decrees, all its ordinances, and all the intricate meanings of thereof. However, what the soul lacks is the experience and the practical application of these concepts. Therefore, the soul is sent to this corporal world to gain that experience and that practical application in order to gain a fuller understanding. So I kind of liken it like this. And that's because Rabbi Ancel is a pilot, and I was in the Air Force, so it's just kind of natural for us to go in this direction, is that a person may read everything there is about flying an F-16 Fighting Falcon, a jet aircraft, military aircraft, and understand. They can understand all the principles, they can understand the controls, they can understand the avionics, and they know what they mean and how they actually operate. But until they actually climb in that cockpit and actually take the controls and actually fly that aircraft, they are not a pilot.
May I make a correction?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. When they get into the plane, they must be able to take that plane from dark to light. That means the plane is no lights, no nothing. They have to know which buttons to push and how to start the plane.
Yeah.
How to start the plane correctly. I mean, if you go into the cockpit, okay, no, an F-16 doesn't have that many, but they're so complicated. There's so many buttons.
Well, I mean, it's like in a helicopter. We have a set way of doing, and it really doesn't matter what the helicopter is. I mean, it's essentially, it hasn't really changed since the 1940s with the Bell 42s. That basically it's top down, bottom up, top down. That's the way you go through the prep to bring the aircraft up to a point where you can actually fly it. And I gotta admit that I gotta think that an F-16 or something on that kind of a line would be at least as difficult as that.
Okay, let's give you an example. The helicopter or the F-16 are totally different. What is an APU? Because you have one out there.
No, go ahead.
How do you start the helicopter?
Oh, well, first of all, you have to shut everything down. And then you have to bring everything up. Depending on the age of the helicopter, you may have to set magnetos and all that other stuff. So basically, you're starting out from the top, which is where your radio controls and everything are, and going down onto your cyclic and your pitch controls and stuff like that. And then you're basically going back up and turning those things on as you go back up, and then coming back down again, and certain things are going off and certain things are going back on.
What I was asking is, when the helicopter is cold, nothing in, how do you start it?
Oh, well.
Okay.
Yeah, you turn the battery on.
If it's a helicopter or a plane, you don't have internal powers. You have the APU, which is the alternate power unit, which is on the outside because you're connected to a power unit. Because once you start the APU, the alternate power unit, and you start up the helicopter or the plane, then you disconnect the APU. You turn it off because now you're on internal power.
Well,
Most
back in World War II, they used to carry a pony motor, didn't they?
exactly.
In the back of the aircraft.
So
It was basically a generator.
most people would go in the cockpit. He would look to start, and he would push the start button. It wouldn't start.
Yeah.
He's gonna,
Yeah.
So once you get into that cockpit, you know about the plane, you know how it works. You don't even know if you're not a pilot, you don't know how to even tie yourself into that seat,
Yeah.
how to connect your air, your breathing air. There's so much stuff to know. Most people don't know how long is the startup. These
Well, and
commercial
then
airlines.
it's not just at the startup. I mean, those engines have to be brought up to temperature and brought up to pressures.
To pressure it into full power.
Yeah, so
You know,
basically in a helicopter, it takes anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes to do that. I know it takes a little bit longer in a jet aircraft, right?
of course. And then you have to see if your controls going to the left, to the right, to
Yeah.
down, to the up are correct. You want to know your engines that are at full power. You want to know the air pressure, the oil pressure, everything. You cannot miss one thing. So yes, it's not as easy as people think it is. Oh, sure, people watch, but it's nice to watch, not to do if you don't know how.
Well, then
But anyways,
you have to know what your
you know,
altitude is at the airport that you're sitting at, because you have to be able to set that and everything. Because
you have
that's the
to know
only way
which,
you're going to get your artificial horizon.
yeah, you have to know how to go to get to the runway.
Yeah.
You may make the wrong turn and end up going the opposite, and you have a collision with an incoming plane. There's so many, you see blue lights and red flashing lights and yellow lights when a plane is going towards the runway. You got to know which one is okay to enter, which way is not okay to enter, when you're allowed to cross a runway because you may go to another runway. There are so many things to know, and you have to concentrate. You cannot forget one thing. The one thing will make you crash.
Yeah. Okay, so
So let's get back.
we're getting a little off target here. So basically, the whole idea of this is that you can't just jump into something and basically know it and have just have the knowledge and know it. The basically what I was saying about this whole thing about until you can do all this, you're not a pilot. Is that basically that the knowledge plus the experience plus the practical application are the only ways to come into a complete understanding or to gain wisdom. Now, wisdom is defined as the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment, and the quality of being wise. Okay, so those who sit in a study hall all day expecting others to support them and their families, refusing to work in a profession or be part of the military, are not fulfilling their role in this corporal world.
Listen, King David, King Solomon, would they study Torah all day, or were they in the wars, protecting the country?
Well, yeah, I mean that's true. I mean he had to rule the kingdom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he had an army,
yeah,
and
yeah.
he was in front of the army. He was a warrior. What does the
Well,
Torah
and then
say?
he really wasn't. He didn't actually have all the power either. I mean, he had to go to, if it was a war for mitzvah, he had to go to Knesset to get permission, or to the
Of
Sanhedrin.
course.
Excuse me. He had to go to the Sanhedrin to get permission. If it was
Oh yeah.
if it was a non-mitzvah war, a war of conquest or whatever like that, then he didn't need that permission. But for a war of mitzvah, he had to do that. Richard has joined us. Good to have you, Richard. So anyway, so let's start out with this idea that they should be exempt from serving in the military. So what
Where is
does
it
the
written?
Torah
Where is,
actually say about that? So in the
even if it even if it's just two people, if your life is in danger, it says you kill them.
right, but in Bamidbar or Numbers, chapter 1, verse 3, it states very clearly, from 20 years of age and upward, all that are able to go forth to war in Israel. And then it goes on in Numbers 26, 2, again in Bamidbar, take the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel from 20 years of age and upward by their fathers' households to all that are able to go out forth to war in Israel. Okay, so now we got to come down to, okay, so everyone from 20 years of age and up is obligated to go out to war. We have to come down now to who is actually exempt from going to war, because everybody cannot, because it says right in there, right in Bamidbar, that are able to go forth. Okay, so we have to go to Deuteronomy, chapter 20, and verse 5 through, I think it's 8. 5 through 8. And that tells us who is exactly exempt from the war. Now, I want you to keep in mind that the students that are sitting in the study halls studying Torah, are they or are they not exempt by the laws of Torah? Laws of Torah are this for exemption. And the officers shall speak unto the people and say, what man is there that hath built a new house, and has not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man dedicate it. Okay, so we know there's one. What man is there that has planted a vineyard and has not used the fruit of it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man use the fruit thereof. Okay, got two. Next one. What man is there that has betrothed a wife and has not taken her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man take her. And then we have further, the officers shall speak and further unto the people and say, what man is there that is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return into his house, lest his brethren's heart melt as his heart. So, which one of those applies to those people who are sitting in the study hall and refusing to go out to the army?
None.
Absolutely none. Okay, so let's go on to the Mishnah Torah, Kings and Wars, the laws of the kings and wars. So if we go to the Mishnah Torah, to chapter 7, starting at verse 3, we find this, okay? And this gives a little more detail as to those exemptions. So, and a little clarification here. Okay, so at the time that they were organized to deploy in their battle array and are ready to do battle, the anointed for war, that is a Kohen who has been appointed to go with the army, at the head of the army. Okay, so not even the Kohanim were exempt. So the one who is anointed for war stands on a high place with the entire army before him and says to them in the holy tongue, Shema Yisrael, you are about to do battle today with your enemies. Have no fear in your hearts. Do not be frightened. Do not scurry about, and do not flee before them. Hashem, your God, goes with you to fight with your enemies and save you. Until here does the anointed for war speak. A subordinate Kohen, okay, so you've got two Kohanim who are going out at the head of the army. A subordinate Kohen now broadcasts this message to the people in a loud voice. The anointed for war again speaks and says, "Is there a man who has built a new house and has not dedicated? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man dedicate it. Is there a man here who has planted a vineyard and has not used its fruit? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man use its fruit. Is there a man here who has betrothed a wife and not taken her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man take her place." Until here does the anointed for war speak. At that point, the marshal, the head of the army, now speaks. And he says, again, he says this to somebody, and his subordinates announces it to it. The marshal himself then speaks and says, "Is there a man here who is afraid and weak of heart?" Another officer then broadcasts this to the people. Okay, so chapter 7, verse 4 goes on to say, "After all those who are to leave have left the front, they arrange the battle array and appoint officers to lead the people. Behind each array, strong and tough gendarmes are appointed and hold an iron axe in their hands. These police have the right to cut the thigh of anyone who wants to flee the battle. For fleeing is the first step to defeat. People are returned from the battlefield in..." Okay, I'm going to slow down here. "People are returned from the battlefield in a discretionary war." This is a war of conquest to expand the boundaries and so forth. "However, in a war of mitzvot, everyone goes out to battle, even a groom from his room and a bride from under her wedding canopy." Where in there does this idea that they don't have to serve in the military come from? Okay, so.
I can give you an answer.
Okay.
They make up their own rules.
Yeah, obviously. They are all, I have heard this so many times. Oh, the Torah says this, the Talmud says this, and that, and the other thing, and so on and so forth. But when it comes right down to it, they are ignoring the laws of the Torah and the Mishnah Torah for the kings and wars. So,
but they call themselves Orthodox.
Yeah. So what constitutes a war of mitzvot in this day? So to get that answer, we have to go again to Bamidbar, chapter 10, verse 9, where it says, "And when you go to war in your land against the adversary that oppresses you, then you shall sound the alarm with the trumpets, and you shall be remembered before the Lord your God, and you shall be saved from your enemies." Now, Rashi goes on to tell us what this means. Rashi goes on to say, pardon?
That means defending your country.
Exactly. That means, what do we constantly have? Rockets coming in from Gaza, right? They are oppressing us in our land. This is a war of mitzvot. There is no doubt about it. You can't call it a discretionary war. It is a war of mitzvot. Everybody is obliged to go out. Now, we see this in the Maccabean revolt, and we saw this also in the Bar Kokhba revolt, where Rabbi Akiva himself went out to war. That the study halls emptied. The only ones that stayed in the study halls were those that were under 20 years of age. Everyone else went out because it's a war of mitzvot. And if we can't say that what is going on in Israel between, rockets being lobbed in from Syria and Lebanon and from Gaza isn't a war of mitzvot, then I don't know what is. Okay.
Rabbi Kahane had it right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was absolutely right. They must leave. That's all there is to it. Okay, let's catch up with the chat room here. We've been talking a lot here, so let's see. So there's a Yeah, a lot of comments about the aircraft stuff there. The only danger was right. Okay, I mean the other. Okay. Donald says he agrees 100%. Marshall says, doesn't the Talmud say all Jews are responsible for each other? Absolutely. Absolutely. And it also says, you shall not stand by while your brother bleeds. Okay, so we know that this whole idea of not going into the military is a red herring. It does not exist. They are actually obligated to go into the military.
Yeah, but you see, Chabad is allowed to make up their own laws. The Satmar is allowed to go, and the Supreme Court doesn't bitch about it. Nobody bitches about it, and they let them go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
So if they see that they're allowed to do it, what's going to happen? They do it.
Exactly. If they had put their foot down at the beginning of this and said, no, the Torah says this, the Talmud says this, and that's the way it is. I mean, I'm sorry, but if we're going to have a state of Israel, we should be observing the laws of Torah instead of kowtowing to political correctness and so on and so forth, and the UN and the United States and everybody else who thinks they have an opinion on the subject.
But here's my question. If you're so orthodox and you are so high and mighty, which Torah do you follow? You must tell them to understand that there's only one Torah.
Right.
And there's only one law. And if you don't follow it, to me, you're not a Jew. It's a harsh thing to say.
You're
and some people may not like what I'm saying. To me, the people. What's the other word from the Karta? They're the group.
Okay.
You mentioned them.
Oh, the goof?
Yeah. No, the group.
Oh.
The Nature Karta.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm sorry.
To me, they're not Jews.
No,
I'm
because
sorry.
they're ignoring. They have disconnected themselves from the contract with God.
They disconnected themselves from God. They disconnected themselves from Torah. You pick up a Palestinian flag. To me, it's like picking up the Nazi flag. To me, there's no difference.
There really isn't much difference.
Sorry, I apologize if I'm wrong. Somebody should say that I'm wrong. But this is how bitter I am what they do, and it's not just doing it to the Jews or to Israel, the Christians, the Muslims, the Catholics. They say, what kind of country is this? Who do they believe in? Which Bible do they believe in?
Yeah.
And they look from outside inside, and some of them are laughing at us.
Oh, well, even on the inside, I mean, we have ministers of parliament who are Muslims who laugh at us constantly.
Yep.
Okay, so
you have a lot of.
Go ahead.
They have a lot of people who are even members of government, members of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
That creates so many different problems. And, the Supreme Court is ruling one way. The two chief rabbis are at each other's heads because each one wants to be the top CEO. And it's a pure mess.
Well, and then it goes on even farther. Now, we were talking about this, I think it was yesterday, we were talking about this, about the, now the Knesset actually wants to have a say in conversions. And that's why Rabbi Lior, the chief Ashkenazic rabbi of Israel, drove his stake in the ground and said, no, not going to happen. We're not going to allow the politicians to determine, the rules for conversion. And I think he's right. I think he's right.
Sephardic rabbi kind of chickened out. And I don't know why.
Well, that's because we don't have a Vadia anymore.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have put up with it.
Vadia?
Yeah.
What? Spit in their face. Not physically, but he wouldn't let it. He would have never let it happen.
Right.
But what's his son doing?
Pardon?
What's his son doing?
Nothing, as far as I can tell. Ovadia Yosef?
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing. I haven't seen anything from him.
I haven't seen any ruling from him.
No.
I haven't seen any opinions.
Exactly.
So
at least I will give Lior credit for saying, for actually driving a stake in the ground.
He said definitely no.
Yeah, exactly.
Because even in Israel, you have the separation of state and religion, just like in the United States. Unfortunately, whether it's United States or Israel, somehow politics will get in there.
Yeah.
And we've seen it happen in the States, and I've seen it happen in Israel and excuse me, in many countries too. But I don't. To me, it doesn't matter what other countries do.
Right.
But Israel is our land.
Because it isn't going to matter. It isn't going to matter anyway. Because whatever we do, the world is going to look at us and they're going to be ticked off about it. It's kind of it's the old situation. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Listen, it doesn't matter. There was one reporter said, the white kid that killed the 10 black persons in Buffalo.
Buffalo, yeah.
You know what he said?
Well, I read his manifesto, and I'll tell you what, that is some crazy stuff.
Yeah. He said eventually they're going to blame Israel. So everything happens in the world. It's a Jew's fault.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, he went on a rant for like 5 pages about the Jews. It was just crazy. I mean, if you haven't read the manifesto, I mean, if you can put up with that kind of crap, yeah, okay, go ahead and read it. But I'll tell you, it reads like a man's diary. It's just all over the place. There's no consistent line in it.
About the Jews, you got with the black people.
Pardon?
I said, if he was ranting about the Jews, why did he shoot black people?
Well, he goes on about blacks and Hispanics constantly through the whole 180 pages of this diatribe that he put together. I mean, he's just constantly going on about it. At least he relegated the Jews to about 25 pages. But yeah. I mean, he picked that place specifically because it had a large African American population there. That's why he picked it. So anyway, we've dealt with the military aspect of this, and we find that they have really no legitimate right to claim any kind of exemption from the military, number one.
Okay.
So what about this whole concept of them? What about this whole concept of them being in the study hall and expecting the state and other people to support them and their families, and they don't have to work because they're too busy studying Torah?
That was I said. That's the second part now.
Right.
And I don't know if I told the group, but I told you the joke about this young Orthodox girl brings a boy home for supper to meet the parents. So after they have supper, the father says to the boy, come into my private office. I want to ask you a few questions. I want to get to know you. So they go into his private office, and the father says to the boy, you see my house. You see I am a well-off person. Says, how will you be able to afford to buy my daughter such a beautiful home? You're studying all day. So the guy says, God will provide. He said, okay. He says, what about a nice engagement ring for my daughter? He says, sir, God will provide. He said, okay. So what about beautiful wedding? It's very, very expensive. He said, I study hard. I said, God will provide. And with that, they finished the conversation. So the husband and the boy, they go to his wife and to his girlfriend. And the wife says to the father, so how did it go? He says, this boy believes I'm God.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
I
So
don't understand. They have no profession.
right.
They have no profession.
And that really,
They
well, we'll get into that because it's a fallacy. It is an absolute fallacy that this was ever even acceptable. Okay, so
why was the what's his name, the Chabad rabbi, the chief rabbi? Why was he allowed to go? Well, he didn't go for long, but he went for one semester to Sorbonne. Why was he allowed to? Why was Rabbi Lieberman allowed to get a PhD in psychology? Why was he allowed to, and nobody else? What was the reasoning that a student, as a Jewish boy, is not allowed to have an education? How are you going to support the wife? So now you have Chabad boys, 20 years old, 21 years old, married with no income, and not everybody's rich, and they go door to door to mooch for tzedakah.
yeah.
I think it's sick. I
Okay.
don't think it's right.
So let's see what the Talmud has to say about this. Okay. So we're going to go into the Talmud, into Tractate Berachot, folio 35b, where it says, this is coming from verse 6, the sages taught, what is the meaning of that which the verse states, you shall gather your grain? Because it states, this Torah shall not depart from your mouths, and you shall contemplate on it day and night. Now, this is the comment that they always go back to. Okay, this comes from Joshua, first chapter, and verse 8. And this is the one they always go to. Okay, but it doesn't hold up. I might have thought, this is the commentator in the Talmud, I might have thought that these matters are to be understood as they are written. One is literally to spend his days immersed exclusively in Torah study. Therefore, the verse states, and you shall gather in your grain and your wine and your oil. Assume in their regard the way that the word set aside time not only for Torah but also for work. This is the statement of Rabbi Yishmael, one of the commentators of the Talmud. Okay, so let's go on to verse 7 now, which just says, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, since Lag BaOmer is coming up, Rabbi Shimon Bar or Ben, depending on who you're reading, Yochai says, is it possible that a person plows in the plowing season and sows in the sowing season and harvests in the harvest season and threshes in the threshing season and winnows in the windy season, as grain is separated from the chaff by means of the wind and is constantly busy, what will become of Torah? That's his question. Rather, he goes on, one must dedicate himself exclusively to Torah at the expense of all other endeavors, as when Israel performs God's will, their work is performed by others as it is stated. And strangers will stand and feed your flocks, and foreigners will be your plowmen and your vine dressers. When Israel does not perform God's will, their work is performed by themselves, as it's stated, and you shall gather your grain. Moreover, if Israel fails to perform God's will, others' work will be performed by them. Then it states, you shall serve your enemy, whom God shall send against you in hunger and in thirst, in nakedness and in want of all things. Okay, so he's got a point. Okay. Says, if we're doing what God wants us to do, then we will have people that are going to take care of those things for us, and we can spend our time studying. However, if we're not, especially in the state of Israel, then we're going to have to do this ourselves. That's basically it. Okay, so we go on to verse 8. We get a little more clarification. Summing up this dispute, Abiah said, although there is room for both opinions, many have acted in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yismael and combined working for a living and learning Torah. And although they engage in activities other than the study of Torah, were successful in their Torah study, many have acted in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and were not successful in their Torah study. They were ultimately forced to abandon their Torah study altogether. Okay, we go on to verse 9. Similarly, Rava said to the sages who would attend the study hall, I implore you, during the month of Nisan and Tishrei, the crucial agricultural periods, do not appear before me. Engage in your agricultural work, then so that you will not be preoccupied with your sustenance all year. Okay, Rava has got a good point here. Okay, so summarizing these statements, we go into verse 10, or Rabbi Bar Chaya, one of my favorite rabbis, said that Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, son of Rabbi Eli, come and see the latter generations are not like the earlier generations. Rather, they are their inferiors. In earlier generations, the earlier generations made their Torah permanent and their work occasional. And this Torah study and that their work were successful to them. However, the latter generations made their work permanent and their Torah occasional. Neither this nor that was successful for them. Okay, we go on to, again, verse 11. Along these lines, Rabbi Bar Chana said to Rabbi Yochanan, said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, son of Rabbi Abe, come and see that the latter generations are not like the earlier generations. In the earlier generations, people would bring their fruits into their courtyard through the main gate in order to obligate them in tithes. However, the latter generation brings their fruits through the roofs, through the courtyards and through enclosed courtyards, avoiding the main gate in order to exempt them from the mitzvah of tithing. As Rabbi Yaniam said, untithed produce is not obligated to the mitzvah of tithing until it sees the front of the house through which people enter and exit and is brought into the house that way, as it is stated in the formula of the confession of the tithes. I have removed the consecrated from my house as the obligation to tithe produce, whose purpose has not yet been designated, takes effect only when it is brought into the house. So essentially, what they are saying is that if we extrapolate that to this situation, what we're saying is basically what they're doing is they're bringing in their fruits through another way so that they don't have to come in through the main gate. And
to avoid so.
Pardon?
To avoid tithing.
Right. So they're coming in and using the Torah studies so they don't have to support themselves and they don't have to go to the military by bringing their fruits in through another way so they don't have to tithe them. So
That's cheating.
they're getting away. They're skirting the obligations, just as they're skirting the obligations in the Torah and the laws of the Mishnah Torah for the laws of the kings and wars. They're doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing as if they were bringing in fruits through the courtyard or through the roof.
They're cheating.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we're at our half. I'm sorry.
What does the room say?
Let's see. What is the best topic of the? Oh, yeah. Donald said this is the best topic of discussion I have ever heard. Okay, thank you for the discussion. Okay, so we're at our halfway point here. Let's go ahead and take our break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at the rabbis from the Talmudic times all the way up until recent times, fairly recent times in the grand scheme of things, and what did they do to make a living? So, I'm going to turn you down here for a second.
Okay.
And we're going to take our break, and we will be back in 6. Please stay tuned. There's more to come.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back. Okay, so Rabbi Ancel and I have been having a very interesting discussion offline. Let's bring Rabbi Ancel back in. You are back on, sir.
I am here.
Okay. So, anyway,
I think we should take this to a second meeting discussion, because there's so much to discuss, because I'd like to see something come up to an answer.
yeah.
What can be done, because we're treading on dangerous ground.
Yeah, I know we aren't going to win any friends over this.
Listen, we're going to be blamed for anything that happens in the world. Is the Jewish fault.
Oh yeah.
So that's not going to go away.
Okay. So let's finish this first. This whole concept of spending your entire life in the study hall studying Torah and being exempt from earning a living and having to rely on other people to support you does not hold up. So let's go back to what the Talmud actually has to say about this, and then let's look at some of the rabbis and what they actually did for a living. So we go on first, the Talmud's attitude towards work. Okay, so the first thing to note is that the sages of the Talmud had a great deal of respect for labor. The Talmud abhors idleness and felt that it leads to mental illness and sexual immorality. That's from the Babylonian Talmud, from Tractate Ketubot, folio 59b. Rabbi Yosef felt that a person does not die except through idleness. And that, again, comes from the Babylonian Talmud, from Tractate Avot de Rabbanan Noson, chapter 11, verse 1. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, again from the Babylonian Talmud, the Nedarim, folio 49b, states, "Great is labor, for it honors the workman." Both sages would purposely carry bundles on their shoulders because they wanted their students to see that manual labor should be respected. Rabbi Yehuda ben Batria said, "If a person has no work to do, what should he do? If he has a dilapidated yard or field, he should go and occupy himself with it. The Talmud, again, also believes that a person should love work and not hate it. For just as the Torah was given with a covenant, so too work was given with a covenant. So, let's look at some of the sages and some of the great rabbis and what they actually did for a living. Okay, so Rabbi Hillel. Most people know Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai, right? The great debates of Hillel and Shammai, right? Okay, so Rabbi Hillel was a woodchopper before he became the Nasi, the president of the Sanhedrin. So he had a job, a woodchopper, okay? Rabbi Shammai, the elder, was a builder or an architect. Okay. Rabbi Hilkiah was a field laborer. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a businessman for 40 years. Rabbi Abba Shaul was a grave digger. Rabbi Osiah was a launderer. Rabbi Shimon Pikuli was a cotton dealer. Rabbi Shmuel ben Shilat was a school teacher. Rabbi Meir, one of my favorite rabbis, and Rabbi Hananel were scribes. Rabbi Yosef ben Halafta was a tanner. Rabbi Yochanan Hasandler was a shoemaker. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah was a blacksmith.
Anania, yeah.
Yeah, Rabbi Safra and Rabbi Dimi of Nehadera were merchants. Rabbi Abba ben Zavina was a tailor. Rabbi Yosef ben Chaya and Rabbi Yanim owned vineyards. Rabbi Huna was a farmer and raised cattle. Rabbi Hisda and Rabbi Papa were beer brewers. Rabbi Karna was a wine seller. Basically, he was a sommelier. He was a wine smeller, as they put it. Basically, he was the one that made the determination that whether a wine could be stored or whether it had to be sold immediately. Rabbi Chaya ben Yosef was in the salt business. And Rabbi Abba bar Avam, the father of Mar Shmuel, was a silk merchant. And Rabbi Shmuel, Mar Shmuel, was a doctor. Okay, so that takes care of the period of time, the sages of the Talmud. Let's go in a little further into the closer to the present. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimonides, Maimonides was a physician. Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, or Nachmanides, was also a physician. Rabbi Isaac Abravanel was a banker and a financier in shipping in Portugal, Spain, and Italy. Rabbi Avraham Zucot was an astronomer and a mathematician. Now, that might seem, kind of esoteric. However, he was the one who created the charts that were used by Vasco da Gama and by Christopher Columbus to navigate. For da Gama was to navigate around the Horn of Africa and up into India, because they couldn't ship their direct way because Muslims were basically attacking every ship. So, of course, Columbus sailed across the ocean, and the only way for these men to know where they were at any point in time was by this perpetual calendar that Rabbi Zacuto developed this perpetual calendar that allowed them to know at what specific time of the year, when the sun was in what position, the moon was in what position, where were they on Earth. So, okay, so moving on, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, Rashi, was a vintner. He was a winemaker. Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen Kagan, or the Chofetz Chaim, was a shopkeeper. Rabbi Yisrael, the Baal Shem Tov, was a wood gatherer, a lime burner, a charcoal burner, and an innkeeper at various times in his life. Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir, or the Rashbam, tended livestock and grew grapes. And my favorite one, Rabbi Shmuel Palache, was a merchant and a pirate. So there, the arguments completely go out of the window when you actually look into them. That that these great rabbis, most of who are known, most of them, the vast majority that we talked about, are rabbis that are in the Talmud. These were very well-educated men, all had an occupation, and all thought that work was a necessary thing for men to do.
So let me ask you a question.
Ask me a question.
Okay, so now we have the Feinsteins, the rabbis from Chabad, the rabbis from the Satmars, the rabbis from many denominations. First of all, you cannot compare them to the previous rabbis.
No, that's true.
Even in knowledge.
Well, isn't that what what it said in Bava Batra? The new generation is not the same as the old?
Yeah. You cannot compare. I mean, they lose. As far as they're concerned, that they're going to sit in synagogue and study all day. First of all, they go against halacha.
Mm-hmm.
And what are they doing? What have they accomplished? What have they written as compared to some of these older rabbis who have written many things about the Torah, about halacha, about Mishnah, about everything else?
Look at the vast
Maimonides.
Yeah, look at the vast work that Rashi did. And I mean, basically, he was a farmer.
What did Caro do?
Caro is a little different subject here. Okay, so Caro actually started in Spain, was expelled from Spain, went to Portugal, and from Portugal went to Italy. Rabbi Caro's father died when he was a young boy. Yep. And he was brought up by his uncle, Yitzhak, I think it was. His uncle, who was basically was a sage, but he did have an occupation. I can't remember what it was, but he taught Caro. When Caro left Portugal, okay, and I'm trying to do this from memory, so if I'm not quite right, forgive me. But when he left there, and then went to Italy, and then from Italy went to Egypt, I think it is. It was Egypt, right?
Correct.
Okay. When he went to Egypt, at the time that he arrived in Egypt, he went back into schools to learn more. So I mean, his uncle was an extremely rich man, just because of the businesses that he was into and stuff like that. Very well known, very well thought of. So therefore, Rabbi Caro could actually afford to spend all his time studying because he was rich.
But Rabbi has the best excuse.
Well, that's the other thing is that yeah, I mean, if you're a rabbi and you're serving a pulpit, and you have a congregation, that's a full-time job.
Yeah, but what I meant that he had the best excuse. He wrote the best piece of
Oh yeah,
any other rabbi. He wrote the Shulchan Aruch. That's a lot of work.
that is. It's a lot of study, and you have to give partial credit to his uncle, who actually taught him in the beginning and made sure that he was well educated, and even after his uncle's death, that was instilled in him, and he continued studying because he could continue studying because he wasn't dependent on a living. He wasn't dependent on charity. He wasn't dependent on a stipend from the state of Israel. He was rich in his own right, and he could do that.
Who else wrote another piece like he did?
Pardon?
I said, who else wrote a piece like he did?
Oh, you could say Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, kind of on a similar kind of vein, who wrote the Zohar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, talk about how much study and how much work would have to go into the Shulchan Aruch and into the Zohar. You're kind of an apples and apples comparison.
Yep.
But again, Rabbi Isaac Luria was again very similar to Rabbi Caro. Was independently wealthy. He could afford to do that. He wasn't begging for money.
Thank God they afforded it because the Shulchan Aruch and the Zohar, one of the two most important pieces beside the Torah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then just look at the vast work of Rashi. Rashi wrote commentary on everything. I mean, that is a tremendous amount of work, and
that's not easy work.
Yeah, and he was making a living at the same time. I mean, and he was running a yeshiva. The man was busy.
Or busy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he had people working for him. He was a vintner, but I mean, most vintners usually have a lot of people working for them, and they basically make the business decisions and stuff like that. But the thing is that he had an occupation and he was supporting himself. He was supporting himself. He was supporting his students. He was supporting his yeshiva. He was supporting his daughters. So.
And writing the Rashi explanations.
And writing all the commentaries and stuff. So yeah, I mean, but during the break, you brought up a question.
I don't remember which one.
Oh, you were saying how do we, with the current state of Israel, how are we going to?
What I said is that if we're going to vote in the Orthodoxy, well, they're going to make up the rules to suit them. If you're going to leave it the way it is,
yeah, we're going to be at the whim of every political correct idea that comes along from the outside world.
But this is what the fathers of the Republic of the United States and also a long time in Israel, they decided that the separation between the church or Judaism and the politics are going to be, politics and the church should be separate. They should not interfere with each other. Unfortunately, that's what's happening now.
Yeah, but in the pre-State of Israel days, basically you had the Sanhedrin, and you had the Knesset.
But the Knesset could not overrule the Sanhedrin.
That's right, they couldn't because the Sanhedrin was kind of like the Supreme Court, right? But I mean,
Correct.
you had the Sanhedrin, which was the religious arm, and you had the Knesset, which was the, what would you call it?
You wouldn't call it the secular arm, but
I wouldn't
would
call it that. No, I would say more that the kind of the day-to-day kind of rule-making legislature, I guess you would call it.
Yeah.
But again, they just like the Constitution, that supposedly Congress can't pass laws that go against the Constitution. It's the same thing in Israel, that the Knesset could not pass rules that went against the Sanhedrins.
No, the Sanhedrin ruled the Supreme Court. The Sanhedrin was above.
Right.
It's the Sanhedrin. There was.
Well, that's what I said. The Sanhedrin would be like the Supreme Court, and the Knesset would be like the Congress.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, the Sanhedrin was way above whatever they ruled.
Right.
But let's hear. I want to hear. For me, it's interesting what the room thinks. It's not an easy.
See, I think people are mainly listening because we're not getting a lot of chat about this in the room. But no, I mean, during the break, you had asked the question about how that you made this statement that because of the secular government in Israel, Moshiach would never come.
It's written in the Torah, there's only two reasons why Moshiach would come. One, if we rebuild the temple according to what it says in the Torah, not what Jews want. If the third temple would be rebuilt in the right place. Where's the right place?
That has to be built by Moshiach.
The second reason, it says, and there was a discussion this week on Facebook about this. It says that if Israel, and that means all of Israel, every single one of them would observe one Sabbath completely, Moshiach would come. The chances of that happening is in a minus value.
Yeah.
It'll never happen.
Okay, so you want to hear my take on this? Okay. The prophecy says we're going to have two Mashiach. Essentially three. Okay? So we will have the Tov of Esav, which will be for the Western world to get them straight. But we will have Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, right?
Well, Moshiach ben David is supposed to be the real one.
Right. Okay. So Moshiach ben Yosef will come at a time when basically the Israeli government is just doing everything except what God wants them to do. Pretty much what they're doing today. Okay? So he will come and he will take control of the basically he will disband the government. He will take control of the military, and he will fight a war to reestablish the boundaries of Israel. Eretz Israel, not the state of Israel, Eretz Israel. Okay.
Yeah.
Towards the end of that period, he will be killed. That's when the Moshiach ben David, who is actually the big Moshiach, will come along. He will complete the wars, and he will bring peace to the world. Okay, so here's how I read this, and I think this is why I think Satmar and Chabad and the other sects of the Haredis are wrong. Okay, because it says, okay, first of all, for Mashiach ben Yosef to come and take control of the army means that there has to be a state. There has to be some kind of a country, whether it's a state, whether it is a country, whether it is a duchy, whether it is a principality, it doesn't matter. It has to be some kind of government over a country, okay? That's the only way, because you can't have an army if you don't have a country, okay? And no point is it actually called an army if you don't. Okay, so he will take over the army. Okay, so when Mashiach ben David comes, he will turn the hearts of the children back to their parents, and the parents to their children. Well, that's Eliyahu. Mashiach will turn the people back to God. Okay, so that means that whatever country entity that you have has to be primarily secular. Because if it wasn't, there would be no need for Mashiach to turn the people back to God.
Correct.
Okay. So can Mashiach come? Absolutely, Mashiach can come in these days because the prophecies are very clear about it. If you read the prophecies, it says there has to be some kind of an entity of a government with a standing army for Mashiach ben Yosef to take over the control of the government and the army to wage war against the nations and reestablish Eretz Israel. And then when Mashiach ben David comes, there has to be a primarily secular country in order for him to turn the people back to God. And that's my theory, for what it's worth.
Moshiach ben Yosef is quite welcome to come. He can come now.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing to stop him. It's the Moshiach ben David that is being stopped from coming.
I don't think he's actually being stopped. I think he will come because, it's only after Mashiach ben David comes that he turns the people back to God. That means the people are not towards God right now, which is the current state. I think Mashiach is going to come regardless of what's going on in Israel and going on among the Jews.
Have to come first.
Pardon?
I said Moshiach ben Yosef have to come first.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He has to come first. Because that's the way the prophecy tells. And at the same as at the time that Mashiach ben Yosef comes, then we will see the Mashiach of Esav, or what they call the Tov of Esav, will actually come, and we'll start getting the Western nations together. Let's put it that way. Getting their relative stuff together. Let's put it that way.
That's going to be a tough job.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So.
What is Richard saying?
Oh, there's. I'm sorry. There's two. There's the Tov of Esav and the Tov of Ishmael. I forgot about the Tov of Ishmael. So you have Moshiach ben David, Moshiach ben Yosef, Moshiach ben David, and coinciding with them, you will have the Tov of Esav and the Tov of Ishmael. Have I completely confused you now?
No, you don't confuse me.
I'm talking to the chat room. I'm talking to the chat room. Okay, let's see.
I don't know if they were aware of the three Moshiachs.
The four, actually. I forgot about the Tov of Esav, or I mean the Tov of Ishmael, which would be the Muslim nations. Okay, so let's see. Donald says, the views and opinions you two are expressing are my own feelings and opinions. That is why I am not commenting. Okay. And Marilyn says, right now I want to see the return of the MAGA king, Mr. Trump. Now, see, Trump could fulfill the role of the Tov of Esav, because Esav is the West. There was
For sure.
there was a rabbi who had actually given a lecture on saying that this was during the Obama administration, and saying that Obama had a opportunity and he completely blew it. So he could have actually been the Tov of Esau and the Tov of Ishmael. So God actually put him in that position so that he could fulfill that, and he blew it. Completely blew it. Because he represented both.
No, that you can't.
Why not?
I'm sorry. So you mean that Obama represented both Asaph and Ishmael?
That he could have.
He
Because
could have.
because he was from the West and he was Muslim. So he would
Yeah,
have been
he
the Tov of...
blew it.
He blew it. He blew it big time.
Because he only won one-sided.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he had a great opportunity. It's just like everybody else God puts into a position of power. He gives them the opportunity.
He blows it.
Whether they fulfill it or whether they blow it is kind of up to them. Well, we know God knows what's going to happen, but they make their decisions, and in this case, Obama completely blew it completely. And Trump actually, the Tov of Esau actually was progressing in that direction, because he did move after 30 years of promises by presidents to move the consulate, the U.S. Consulate, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
You mean the embassy?
He actually did it. And he actually did it cheaper than what they were saying it was going to cost. But he was on the right track.
He actually moved the embassy.
He did. That was at the embassy. The embassy. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, I was thinking. I said consul. I meant the embassy. But yeah. I mean, for what was it, 30 or 40 years, U.S. presidents have been promising to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and every president just said, it's not the right time. And then Trump comes along and says, nope, we made a promise, we're going to keep it, we're going to move it, and we're going to have it done within 6 months. And he did it.
When would have been the right time? You got to ask.
Well, that's exactly it.
What was the excuse? What is the right time? How do you decide?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're going to wait for the nations to say it's okay, or you're going to wait for the UN to say it's okay, I mean, that ain't never going to happen. I mean, if you want any proof that God actually works in this world, all you have to do is look back to 1946 and the establishment of the State of Israel, when they actually voted to partition the Palestine, whether it was right or wrong, they actually voted to partition and establish the State of Israel. And if you don't think that's a miracle in itself, when all you have to do is look at everything that happened from that point on, and how the world has condemned Israel constantly from that point on, it was a miracle.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
And I think in the next time, we should come up with some opinions, and I'm asking also the people in the room to come up with some ideas, some opinions. How can we change that there is a medium in the United States where I know what the United States. I know what Israel needs. Where the medium is, I want to see the people in the room what they would think. Where the medium between the secular and the orthodoxy. At what point or where could they meet?
Ah,
That would be an interesting topic.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. That difficult too. I mean,
Yeah,
if you
well,
really
yes,
start to think about it, yeah, that could take some thought.
it would be interesting because there is a possibility. Because I believe in in you can take and you can give, but it depends on the people, and that is a good discussion.
Yeah. Right, Richard.
Because
Richard
there's,
actually put
there's
something in the chat room. I found interesting. He says it's the prophecy in Zechariah of the four horses. I think he's referring to Moshiach ben Yosef, Moshiach ben David, the
yeah,
Tov of Esav, and the Tov of Ishmael.
yep,
I'm going to dig back into that.
yeah. The thing is, it can be done. There could be a point where there is a middle, because listen, whether you call somebody secular, yeah, you can call somebody secular, but that doesn't mean he doesn't put on tefillin, or he doesn't mean that he doesn't go to synagogue. It doesn't mean that he doesn't go to the holy days. There's so many different levels of
Right.
secularism,
Yeah.
and there's so many levels of orthodoxy that you can go totally. Here's the biggest thing. I was chief chaplain for the Hebrew Kadisha for the state of Florida.
Right.
So I was asked, because I used to go to Chabad synagogue because that was the closest synagogue for me on Shabbos. Chabad asked me to run their own what do you call it? The Tahara room.
No.
Okay. Anyways, I wrote the rules for the Taharas. How long do you think they lasted? Not even 10 minutes. So I wrote the rules, and I sent the rules from Chabad to the Satmars in the state of Florida, and they laughed me out of the room. I sent it to the Breslovs, the Heat and they agreed. I sent it to the Orthodox organizations of the state of Florida, and they said, "I'm sorry, sir, we have our own." Then I sent a few synagogues within Florida that had their own Hebrew Kadisha. I said, "Can't we Jews? This is what Rabbi Schneerson hated when you said Reform, Orthodox, this." He said,
Yeah.
"I'm sorry. For me, a Jew is a Jew."
Right.
I said, "Why can't we get together? Let's lock ourselves, like they say when they elect a pope. Let's sit down in a room, lock ourselves in a room, go through every single prayer and procedure for a tahara, and make a standard." And they laughed me out of the room. That was the end of it.
Yeah.
So Chabad does their taharas long way.
Well, it's going to be like well, I'm sorry to have to go in this direction, but it's going to have to be kind of like the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah.
Right, where Constantine came in and he closed the doors, he locked it, and he said, "You guys aren't coming out until you come to a unified agreement on these things, and if you don't, I'm just going to start reducing your food every day."
The Satmars has the craziest idea about a tahara. They have to have 8 people, 4 people doing the tahara, and 4 people holding a talus over a tahara, which is a disrespect to the deceased, because you're showing them that you're showing them a talus, and it's almost throwing it in his face.
They can't wear it.
We got the talus, but you can't wear it.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
And I say to you, tell me, guys, where did you come up with this idea? Our rabbi told us to do so. What makes them right? And they just look at me and they said, we don't know. We only do what he tells us. I said, okay, so let's say you came and I asked you to help me to do a tahara. And I said, you're going to do it my way. And they said, so we won't come. And that was the end of it. Nobody wants to come together. My question is, how is the secular people going to come eye to eye with the Orthodox and say, okay, we're going to elect a pope. Let's lock ourselves in a room, get food, get wine, let's sit down and hammer out the rules, and everybody's going to be happy. So therefore, if I go in Florida and I go to a Satmar synagogue and by chance they're short for somebody passed away to do a tahara, and Ancel goes and helps, Ancel knows what to do.
Right.
Ancel walks into a Satmar room, and I start doing something, and these people look at me and say, no, that's not correct. Well, what makes them tell me it's not correct? Because it's the right thing to do, but they do it differently.
Yeah, I mean they're confused. They're confusing the law with minhag.
Right. So it comes out to the same thing, but differently. But it makes it so awkward for all people going from town to town to town, not having a standard rule. And this is the thing about the secular Jews and the Orthodox Jews. Each one wants to be the CEO and never agree.
Yeah. Well, we are actually a little bit past the end of our time.
That's okay.
And so we are going to we'll close out this discussion. We'll discuss more of it next week. I hope you're finding this stuff interesting. Let me. No, hang on. Okay, so tomorrow night is the Torah study in depth. We're going to kind of break away from our typical study, and we're going to do a little bit of study about Lag BaOmer, because shortly after we start the session, it will be Lag BaOmer. So we're going to study on that. We're going to take a look at the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud and see what they have to say about Lag BaOmer and some of the words of the sages and the rabbis about it. So should be interesting. And then Friday night is the Kabbalat and Mariv Shabbat service at 8 p.m. Eastern, and Shachrit and Musaf and Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. And then again, Zeta's Story Corner on Monday at 8 p.m. Special storyteller for the last one for the summer, and then right back here on next Tuesday for the Rabbis Discuss. So until I'm going to turn you down here for a second, whether you like it or not. Okay. So until the next time, we'll simply say, Laila Tov.